Welcome to this Metricom briefing. Today, we're going to tackle a phrase that I'm sure you've heard a dozen times on site. It's just background. We're going to unpack what that really means for your project's risk, your schedule, and of course, your budget.
Now this explainer is specifically for you, the site managers and the project teams out there on the ground. We're going to cut right through all the regulatory jargon and get straight to what this means for your actual day-to-day work. So let's dive in.
I want you to picture this. It's a scenario that's probably all too familiar. You get a soil sample back from the lab, and a number is flagged in red. It's over the limit. But then your consultant, or maybe your boss, tells you, hey, don't worry, it's just background. It's such a common phrase, right? But what does it actually mean? And more importantly, what's your next move?
Well, that brings us to our first really big point, what I like to call the just background fallacy. This is a massive, and I mean potentially very costly misunderstanding that can send ripples through your entire project.
Here's the trap that so many people fall into. The assumption is that if something is background, it's just naturally there in the geology or it's part of the general urban fill, then it's safe, that you can just check a box and move on. Let me be clear, that assumption is just plain wrong, and it can expose your workers, your project, and your budget to some serious risk.
So, to really understand why, we've got to make a crucial distinction. It's not about where the contaminant came from. Not really. It's all about who or what might come into contact with it. This is the absolute core of the issue. Origin versus exposure.
And this slide really nails it. On one side, you've got background. That's the origin story. It tells you where the stuff came from. But on the other side, you've got the much more important question of risk. That's all about exposure. It doesn't really matter where it came from if your crew is breathing it in as dust, right? That's what defines your risk on site.
Which leads us to probably the single most important thing you'll hear today. Background interpretation is not the same as risk screening. I'm going to say that again. Just because you know the origin doesn't mean you've screened for the risk. Identifying something as background is step one, but assessing the actual risk, that is a completely separate and absolutely non-negotiable second step.
Okay, so let's get practical. How does this actually play out on a real job site? How does a supposedly harmless background issue suddenly turn into a very live risk that you, the site manager, have to deal with?
It's a simple chain of events, really. You start with your baseline, just soil sitting there with some naturally occurring metals in it. No big deal. But then you come along. Your project starts excavation, and now you have these big stockpiles. That soil is now on the surface, and then a pathway is created. The wind kicks up, it blows across that stockpile, and suddenly you've got dust in the air. The origin of the metals hasn't changed one bit, but your work has just created a brand new exposure pathway and a very real risk for your workers and maybe even the neighbors.
And this is exactly why we have to move beyond that simple, is it background question. We need to be asking a different set of questions. So here's the checklist. Think of these as the questions a real pro needs to ask to get a true handle on the risk.
So let's run through them. First, is the material accessible? If your team's digging in it, well, yeah, the answer is yes. Second, can it migrate? Can it move? You bet. Wind can turn that soil pile into dust. Rain can create runoff. Third, and this is the big one for you, will our project activities create a new exposure? The answer is almost always yes. And finally, you have to think long-term. What about the people who will live or work here after you're gone? These are the questions that take you from just talking about regulations to actually managing risk. Answering those questions has direct, tangible consequences for your project plan. This isn't just a paperwork exercise. This stuff hits your schedule, and it definitely hits your bottom line.
Think about it. Your entire understanding of exposure risk can change everything. It changes how you plan your excavation and how you segregate your soil stockpiles. It completely dictates your disposal strategy. Can you reuse that soil on site, or are you now paying for expensive off-site disposal? It drives your health and safety plan. Do your workers need special PPE like respirators? It can even impact how you handle dewatering. Every single one of these is a major line item on your project's schedule and budget. So let's end with this one final thought. A background exceedance, it might not establish legal liability for who put the contamination there in the first place, but as the site manager, you are absolutely responsible for managing it as a live risk issue today. Always remember the key principle. Background explains the origin, but exposure, that's what determines the risk. So the next time you hear someone say, don't worry, it's just background, your immediate follow-up has to be, understood, now tell me who's exposed.